Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Soil Health Assessment video series. My name is Brian Doherty, Ag Engineering Field Specialist with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. And in this video, I'm going to talk about soil biology. I'll go through a couple different methods that you can use to do earthworm counts. And I'm also going to do a quick demo with a cell phone microscope to show you some of the different things that you can do with the microscope for looking at soil biology. So let's get started.
So here's just a quick demo with the cell phone microscope. So these just clip on over the camera on your cell phone. Now you'll notice everything looks blurry right now. So what you have to do with this is get very close up to what you're looking at. So in this case, I found a little earthworm moving around here. And so pretty cool when you can zoom in like that. And so this is just on 1 power zoom right now with your regular camera. If you want to get in even closer, then you can actually zoom in the camera on your phone as well to get more magnification. And so just a way to get a very close-up look at your soil biology, see what's going on there. So another thing you can do with these is if you're doing crop scouting, you want to look at any leaf tissue, you can put that right up to your microscope. If you want to get a closer look at some lesions or anything like that, that black spot there, I actually can't even see that with the naked eye. And so these cell phone microscopes, very inexpensive. I believe this one is like $15. You can find them on Amazon. If you just do a web search for cell phone microscopes, you can find these. So really handy little tool to have out in the field to look at different things. You can take a look at, your root hairs, get a really close up look at those. Just they're kind of fun to play around with. Handy thing to have if you're out in the field, if you're digging in the soil and you want to see what's going on.
So today we're focused on soil biology. So one of the ways you can kind of measure or get an indication of soil biology and how active your soil is to do an earthworm count. So a few things to note about earthworm counts before I get started here. It's a little bit site specific, so you have to be a little bit careful doing earthworm counts. You can't really compare counts in say very deep, dark Midwestern soil, in central Iowa to, something in the southern U.S. or western United States. Not all areas have a lot of earthworms to begin with. And particularly if you have a sandy soil, you probably won't find very many, if any, earthworms. So it's really kind of soil specific. We're here in northeast Iowa. This is a silt loam soil, so we would expect to find a fair number of earthworms. The other thing I would mention with earthworms is the night crawlers, or what we typically think of as, our deep dwelling earthworms, actually aren't native to the U.S. They came over from Eurasia. And so they can do a lot of good things for our soil. They're what we call an ecosystem engineer. They can really change, the environment in the soil. They can improve water infiltration. They can do a lot of good things for your soil. But what I'm going to do here is show you two different ways to do earthworm counts. Now, this is the first way. So what I did was I dug up a 1 cubic foot volume of soil, and I'm simply going to manually sort through all of this and see how many earthworms are in there. So we have a couple little containers here. If you just want to throw them all in one, just get a total count, that's fine. If you want to separate out your night crawlers from your redworms, and try to do different species, you might need multiple containers. But we're just getting a total count on the number of earthworms. So if you want to know for sure how many worms you have there, this is a good way to do it. But, this is a lot of work, I have to be honest. A cubic foot of soil like this will weigh about 80 pounds. And as you can see, it doesn't look anything like a cube now, because it's almost impossible to get it out intact. So you can use a smaller volume. A lot of people do, say, an 8-inch cube. That would be a little bit easier to handle, a little bit easier to dig up. But I'm going to do another test here in a minute that I'll show you that also is a cubic foot. So I wanted to kind of compare apples to apples and see what we get for earthworm counts with these two different methods. So I'm going to sort through this and we'll see how many worms we find.
Okay, so I've sorted through the whole cubic foot of soil here, and I came up with 22 worms. I'll give you a quick look here, and you can see I kind of sorted them by size, but some of these smaller redworms can be quite difficult to find and detect when you're sorting through that soil. So this particular soil that I grabbed here, this field, if you watched the last video where I dug the soil pit, it was in that exact same area. So that was in alfalfa for 3 years, and then first crop hay was taken off this year, and corn was no-tilled into that. So this hasn't been tilled for about 4 years. So as far as scoring and earthworm count, at least in this area, I would say if you're under 5, that's a very degraded soil in that cubic foot. If you're between 5 and 25 earthworms, that's kind of a mid-range. And over 25, I'd call that a healthy soil. So we were at 22 here, so pretty good. Again, hasn't been tilled for 4 years, so that makes a big difference. But that's a if on a 1 to 10 scale, I'd probably give that a 6 or a 7 as far as earthworm count. The other thing to note on earthworm counts, it's middle of July right now, which isn't the best time of year to dig for earthworms. It's generally you're going to find more worms, earlier in the spring or maybe later fall. So that's, the time of year is another thing to take into consideration when you're doing an earthworm count.
So that's one way to do an earthworm count. Obviously, again, it's a lot of work. It takes time. It's kind of tedious. So a second method you can use to do an earthworm count is, I guess, what I call a mustard test, for lack of a better term. So what you do there, I've got a square here, and this is 12 square inches, and so it's going to cover the same area, that soil I just dug up there, and you make a solution using mustard powder. So what you want to do here is use about a half a cup of mustard powder per 5 gallons of water. You mix that up in warm water. Ideally, you do this a day ahead of time, and you let it set. And so this mustard, it won't kill the earthworms, it won't hurt them, but they definitely do not like it. And so the reason you do it ahead of time is it's actually kind of the mustard gas, that they'll try to avoid. So if you let it sit overnight, you'll get some gas production, and it'll dissolve in that water. And so what you do is you just lay this down on the soil, and then you pour the solution in that area and just simply count how many worms come up in that, 12 by 12 inch area. And so I'm going to go and do that right next to where I dug this soil up. And so you pour it on, wait 2 or 3 minutes, collect whatever worms come up, and then do it a second time. And then again, collect the worms, and we'll do a comparison, see how many worms I get with that method versus manually sorting through a cubic foot of soil.
All right, so I've got my square set up here, and now I'm just gonna take and pour my mustard powder solution into that square, and we're gonna count and see how many earthworms we get. So another thing I didn't mention earlier about the mustard powder, you want to put that in a container that's sealed so it can allow that gas pressure kind of build up in that container. So I'm just going to slowly pour this on. A little bit of it's going to run outside the container, but that's okay. And we're going to try and get this nice and saturated and see if we can get some worms to come up. So I've given it some time here, soaked it down a few times, let it soak in. And so far, I've only gotten 4 worms to come up to the surface using this method with the mustard powder. So that contrasts to the 22 that I found when I actually dug up that cubic foot of soil and sorted through it manually. So it could be a couple things going on there. One, when I dug my soil pit earlier, I did notice that most of the worms I was seeing tended to be 8 inches or deeper in the profile. And so when you do this method where you're trying to soak in from the top, it takes quite a while for that water to get down that far. So, it could be that those worms are just deeper in the profile. Again, it's mid-July right now. not a great time to be doing an earthworm test. So that could be one of the reasons why I didn't see nearly as many worms using this method. And just in general, you can't expect that you're going to get as many worms to come to the surface as you're going to find if you actually sort through the soil. One other thing that you can look at when you're assessing soil biology is, look at your surface and look at how much residue shredding that you have happening. So that's an indication that you've got some, larger, species that are working on that residue and breaking it down. So again, this was alfalfa that was terminated, and then no-till corn planted into that. And so that was about 6 weeks ago. We still got good residue cover here, which is good, helps protect the soil. But I don't see a lot of evidence here of this residue being, chewed up by beetles. I've seen a few ants here. And so that's just something else you can look at, if you're going to try to score this. The more biological activity that you can see happening at the surface, that's a better indicator of that you have a lot of biology going on underground. You can also look for earthworm middens. And so that's another good indication that you've got good earthworm activity. If you see earthworms creating middens and dragging a lot of material down into the profile. Here's just one example that I found of an earthworm midden. So this material was all clumped up over the hole there, and I scraped it away. Found a nice macropore there. So something you can look for, when you're looking at evidence of biology above ground.
So that's a wrap on soil biology. I encourage everyone to try some of these methods out on your own property. Do some earthworm counts, do some digging, get a cell phone microscope, see what you can find, and just explore the biology in your own cropping systems. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.